Hello and welcome. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never seems to end. It's Paul Zeise, and we are obviously here for the daily Zeise moment. Actually, Zeise sometimes half hour, 45 minutes, hour. We're not sure what the hell we're doing here, but we're having a good time nevertheless. And of course, we thank you for joining us, and more importantly, if you want to participate in the show, you're always welcome to leave comments. Good comments will get added into the show. Bad comments will be ignored, and therefore you can do exactly what you need to do. We are not going to start talking about Justin Fields because Mick is upset that we might talk about that again, even though that's probably the topic that's been going on this week. And that's one of the things that people are actually talking about. I think it's more important to take a look at the Cleveland Browns, which, if you think about it, at the beginning of the season, there was a discussion, believe it or not, about where the Browns fit in the AFC North. And there were a lot of people that were convinced, that the Browns were actually better than the Steelers. That the Browns had the best roster in the AFC North. There was some flights of fantasy about the fact that Deshaun Watson was going to figure it out at some point. That Deshaun Watson was going to, reach back and find whatever he had in Houston that made him such a really good quarterback back in the day and made the Browns want to sign him up for, $250 million guaranteed or whatever it was. Well, obviously that didn't happen. And I think the reason it didn't happen is because I just think that you take a couple things happen with these guys. Number one, you take a year off. It's really hard. And he took almost more than a year off, number one. Number two, I think with all of that stuff going on around him, and of course, you all know what we're talking about when we say all that stuff going on around him. I think one of the things that really is tough is the focus, is to keep your mind on, well, this is what I need to do. And, I need to, continue to work on my craft. And, when you've got all these court cases hanging over your head, when you've got criminal cases, when you've got civil cases, you've got all this stuff hanging over your head. It's really, really difficult to focus on what you need to focus on. And I think the other part of it is, once you sort of get out of the rhythm of practicing and playing every day and all that other stuff, you know what? I think it's really difficult to recapture what you're doing. So to me, when you really look at Deshaun Watson, I think we, or anybody that thought he was going to get back to being the superstar he was in Houston, probably you're kidding yourself a little bit. And I think that's the key really with it all, is that this is a guy who probably is never going to live up to even close to his contract. And so a lot of the hype about the Browns this year, a lot of the hype about how they were going to be really good this year, centered around the idea that Deshaun Watson was going to somehow find the formula that he had in Houston and become a star again. That hasn't happened. And not only that hadn't happened, it hasn't even been close to happening. I mean, I got a kick out of the fact that if you look at what he's done since he's got back to Cleveland, I think he's had basically 2 good games since he's got back, if that many. I can think of one where he played really well in the second half. It was last year, I think, where he played really well in the second half. And, people say, wow, if they get that version of Deshaun Watson, they've got a shot. The problem is, you're not going to get that version of Deshaun Watson. I mean, you're just not. It's a situation of where he's probably cooked. He's probably cooked for, as long as they continue to have to pay him. I mean, one of the discussions in the offseason that was kind of, I got to get in the middle of this thing. There we go. That was kind of amusing was this idea that somehow, the Browns were rooting for him to get into more trouble so that they could get rid of his contract. I mean, imagine that. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think the Browns were rooting to get out of his contract, but I know the Browns know that they screwed it up. So let's take a look at the Browns, the Steelers' next opponent, give you some idea of what we're looking at. Okay. First and foremost, Myles Garrett is interesting because he's been listed as questionable. And if you've watched any of the Browns games this year, he has actually been hampered by a number of different injuries. So Myles Garrett is banged up a little bit. Their left cornerback, Denzel Ward, he's banged up a little bit and questionable. And they've got some real injury issues on their offensive line. And I think that's, one of the things they've got to sort of figure out. They're down to their third center. They're down to their third and fourth, or their third tackle. So, and both their tackle and their guard this weekend, for this week are both questionable. So, the offensive line is not in great shape. You're already down to backups at I think 3 of the 5 spots they're already down to backups. And now you're talking about 2 guys getting maybe not being able to play. You're talking about a makeshift offensive line. The Steelers' defensive front should be feasting, should be licking their chops for a chance to get a hold of the Browns this week, given how depleted they are. But I think the other part of that is the Browns are a team that obviously like to, run the football, and Nick Chubb is really, really good. Even now, he's good, even though he, is gotten to a point where he, had that really bad injury last year and had to come back. And, he's probably not 100%, but he's still really good. But you know what? If the offensive line is beat up, I don't know how good he's actually going to be. I look at what he's done so far this year, and believe me, I really like Nick Chubb. I do. I think he's a guy that, before he got hurt, was clearly one of the 2 or 3 best running backs in the league. If you look at what he's doing now, he's really kind of not that guy anymore, or at least for now. Sunday against the Saints, 11 carries, 50 yards. Long of 14. The week before that, they played the Chargers. Chubb had 15 carries for 39 yards. Not really all that exciting. Against the Ravens the week before that, Chubb had 16 carries for 52 yards. And so, you added on that against the Bengals, he was 11 carries for 22 yards. If you add it all up, he's got in 4 games, he's got 53 carries, 163 yards, 3.1 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. His longest run is 15 yards. And so, I know yesterday at the press conference, Mike Tomlin, called him, what did he call him? Mr. Chubb or something like that. You know what? I think at the end of the day, I don't know that he's Mr. Chubb anymore. I just don't. I think that really he's sort of a nice player, but that's about really all he is. And I think he's actually a guy who's more of an afterthought than he used to be. That's really kind of what it is. And I think that's going to be, I think, the biggest issue in my mind with him is, he's not going to find the fountain of youth. He's not going to be able to just magically become the player that he was this week. So I think really when you look at it from that standpoint, you know what? This Browns team, are they scary? There's always the rivalry thing and whatnot. they somehow, every so often they find a way to come up and make enough plays to win games. But I'll be honest with you, I just don't think honestly that it is going to be a situation of where this team poses that much of a threat. As I said yesterday, I think the wild card could be Jameis Winston. I mean, I think I might have said this yesterday, but I'll say it again. I don't think there's a more entertaining player than Jameis Winston in this league. I don't. I think when you look at Jameis Winston, he's a guy who's completely capable of keeping both teams in the game for the entire time the game is going on. And I think that really when you look at his production and what he's been able to do and hasn't been able to do, I mean, he's put up bigger numbers than Deshaun Watson ever could. That was the big thing about it. I mean, there are people that I've actually seen people saying, well, I don't think Jameis Winston is any better than Deshaun Watson. And I'm looking at it from the other side, and I'm saying, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I think that's really, to me, if you look at what Jameis Winston's done since he's taken over, I mean, I don't know that they've been world beaters, but look at some of the games that he's had. I mean, this week certainly wasn't his fault that they couldn't win. I mean, they gave up 35 points and they lost, but I'm looking at his numbers from this week. It was 30 of 46 for 395 yards and 2 touchdowns. The week before that, of course, he threw 3 interceptions. Like I said, against the Chargers, he keeps both teams in the game. And then you look at the Baltimore game, and I think if you look at the Baltimore game, he was 27 of 41 for 334 yards. The Browns beat the Ravens, and he threw for 334 yards and 3 touchdowns. So my point is, he's capable of keeping both teams in the game. He's capable of throwing the ball to the other team as much as he is to his team. But if he gets hot, it could get kind of interesting. Like I said, he's very entertaining because he is such a wild card in terms of how much variance there is in what he does. And mostly because, listen, if you want to, we've been talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick and his lack of interceptions. I would say tomorrow might be a good time. Thursday might be a good time for him to bust out and have a few interceptions, because at the end of the day, Jameis Winston is going to throw it up for grabs. He's going to put the ball in harm's way because that's just how he is. He's reckless. He's the kind of guy that, he just wants to make plays, and he wants to make sure that he makes big plays all the time. He wants to try and take chances. And listen, I mean, even that game against the Ravens, on the game-winning drive, if you saw that game, and the game-winning drive, Jameis Winston might have thrown it to the Ravens like 4 times or 3 times. They just couldn't catch it. The worst one was the one where he threw it like kind of to his this way, and he basically threw it to Kyle Hamilton of the Ravens right in between his numbers, and Kyle Hamilton missed it. I mean, that should have been game over, and the Browns would have lost. But the bottom line was they missed it. So there's no question. There is no question that the Steelers will have opportunities to turn the ball, to turn it over against Justin Fields. I don't think there's any question about it. And I think that's the key to me is it's really important to note that I think, for instance, he's going to have an opportunity to try and, to throw a few touchdown passes, because he's a good quarterback from the standpoint of he throws a nice ball, and he's accurate. He's got a good arm, but he's also going to have opportunities to throw the ball to the Steelers. So looking at the Browns and where they're at, the other part of it is you wonder, and this is a fair thing to wonder, when it comes to the Browns. At 2-8, have they packed it in for the season? I mean, for the most part, they know their season's over. For the most part, they know that they're in bad shape when it comes to the any chance of the playoffs. For the most part, they understand that. They understand where they're at and what they're doing. Sometimes, and then you add to the fact that a number of their key players are hurt. A number of their key players are banged up. This could be one of those games where if the Steelers are able to jump up and punch them in the mouth quick and early, it could be a game that the Steelers sort of run away from them a little bit. Now, again, there's other factors, obviously, on Thursday night. Steelers are obviously, just like the Browns, not going to be able to really do a full game plan. Steelers, just like the Browns, number of their guys, especially their older guys, will still be a little bit banged up and bruised and, maybe a step slow or whatever you want to say, on Thursday Night Football. Because it's a short week and it's, a short game plan week, there's not nearly, as much time to really work on the game plan. So these games tend to be sloppy, and sloppy games mean there's more variance in, the number of turnovers that happen, who gets the turnovers. All that stuff is in play. I get it. But the reality is that the Steelers come out and do what they do early and often. This could be a game where the Browns just basically pack it in and say the hell with it. Just the hell with it. I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't fun. We've seen that from time to time. And at that point, you've got to wonder, is Kevin Stefanski's job eventually going to be, is he ever going to be on the hot seat? Because this is a team that for the last 3 or 4 years has had a better roster than their record has been. So at some point you have to say, well, Kevin Stefanski is a guy who, I don't know, is not getting it done. So again, and then if you have a coach where players start to feel like he's in a lame duck status, then you have a coach where players are going to try and take advantage of him. And they're basically going to, not necessarily want to fight for him. That's just the reality. So I feel like when you look at it from all of those angles, the Browns game against the Steelers on Thursday night, the Browns, I did a little preview for you of the Browns. I don't think outside of, some arbitrary, mistakes are made here, or there's a run of turnovers, or some bad plays, or bad luck, or, Jameis Winston goes crazy. Outside of something outside of the norms actually happening, I just don't see how the Browns are going to beat the Steelers. I don't. I feel like it's just not. I think it's a pipe dream. I do. I think it's a pipe dream. I any given Sunday, I know, rivalry game, I know. I've looked at the Browns roster for the last 24 hours. I've looked at their team for the last 24 hours. I've looked at their injuries for the last 24 hours. I've read some of the articles from up there. This does not sound like a team that's dialed in and, focused on playing. Whereas the Steelers are a team that are focused. They're dialed in. They're playing for playoff positioning. They're playing, and you can throw this in there too. I don't know that they're necessarily playing for this week, but if they win this week, it keeps the never had a losing season streak intact. I mean, there's a lot of things that have the Steelers dialed in and ready to play. So I think that that's going to be enough of an edge that even if they don't play their A game, they should have a chance to win. By the way, the game's always on at Archie's on Carson Street. Pittsburgh's best place for food, drinks, and sports. Open Sundays for the game, 12 p.m. to 2 a.m. Be sure to check their daily drink specials. Stop in for 80-cent wing nights Monday through Thursday. Tell them Paul Zeise sent you. Also, you know what? If you get there, eat my grilled cheese sandwich, the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich at Archie's on Carson Street. You'll have a good time with that. In fact, I was there last night. My daughter came, and she met me for dinner. And she said, I think I'm going to have your grilled cheese. And then my daughter, who's my toughest critic, says to me, you know what? I'll give you credit. This is actually pretty good. So there you have it. Get down to Archie's and enjoy wings and everything else. And of course, we have I'm sure the Steelers game will draw a big crowd on Thursday night. And of course, if you go there on Sundays and you're a fan of other NFL teams, they have the ticket and everything else. So they have all the games. And Saturdays, like I said, they usually have a pretty big contingent of West Virginia and Pitt fans there to watch those games respectively. But anyway, nevertheless, Archie's on Carson Street. So nevertheless, you know what? There's this subject that will not go away about Justin Fields. And I think the thing about Justin Fields is he's a good enough player that, yeah, you want to try and use him. And I think in the red zone, maybe there's a few opportunities to use him as well. But I think you got to be careful with what I'm reading and seeing from people basically talking about how, he's going to be the cure for their red zone issues. I don't know that that's necessarily the case either. Here's the other thing, and I'll say this too. Here's the other thing. I feel like it's important to note that Justin Fields has had snap problems. He's had, some issues. I know they're in the preseason, but a couple in the regular season too, where he's had issues fielding the snap. Some of it was the center's fault. Some of it was his fault. Either way, he's had issues. So you've got to take that into account a little bit and be careful. The other thing that is a really important thing to remember is that if you have a quarterback like Russell Wilson, you want him to get in rhythm. You want him to continue and stay in rhythm. So you've got to be very, very careful, because if you aren't careful, you could risk taking away the rhythm from your normal offense when you go to these kind of gimmick things. And I know the Saints, they use Taysom Hill very wisely, and they're able to use him as sort of the ultimate weapon. But one of the things they do with him that the Steelers have not done with Justin Fields, they line him up at running back. They line him up at receiver. They've lined him up at like an H-back situation. They've lined him up in the wildcat. So, they do a lot of things with Taysom Hill that the Steelers don't do with Justin Fields. When Justin Fields is in there, for the most part, he's playing quarterback in the conventional offense. He's not, he's not out there. They don't even really use the wildcat formation with him. I mean, he's out there. When he's out there, they're in their basically their base offense, their normal formation, and all that other stuff. That's where they're at. That's what they do with him. And so, people that want to compare him to Taysom Hill, it's completely different. I mean, if you've watched the Saints play, it's different. Taysom Hill is not a guy they line up at straight quarterback. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was even Sean Payton maybe, who was trying to, with a straight face say that Taysom Hill was going to be like the next quarterback after Drew Brees, which was silly. But it's a completely different animal than what they do with Justin Fields. Taysom Hill, again, you see him, he takes snaps at running back. He takes snaps at receiver. He takes snaps at H-back. When they use him at quarterback a few times, sometimes he's in the wildcat position, wildcat formation. So I feel like if you look at all that together, it's not the same as what we're talking about here. It's not. It's not the same as what we're talking about here with respect to Justin Fields. I just think that you've got to remember that. You can't compare one to the other because they're not comparable. And I think Justin Fields, everybody's clamoring for the package, whatever that package is going to be. We're going to put the Fields package in. How many plays really do they have in the package? And the more that you see it, the less effective it becomes. There are some people that say they want to see Justin Fields out on the field for 10 plays a game or 12 plays a game. You know, my thoughts on that is if they were going to put him on the field that many times, I would hope that a number of them would be at receiver, would be at running back, would be at H-back, whatever. I would hope that would be the case. Because if that's not the case, then they're wasting him. And so I feel like it's important to note that. We've got, a lot of different things that we could go, a lot of different directions we could go with it. But if you're just going to use him at quarterback in a package where, you have a few running plays for him or whatever, I just don't know that that's really going to get it done. I feel like it's not going to be enough. And I think teams will see it and they'll sniff it out pretty quickly and they'll try and figure out, where he's going and what he's doing when he gets the ball. But either way, I feel like, that's one thing that you have to take into consideration. The snapping thing is another thing. His inability at times to field the snaps cleanly, you know what? If you put him in and there's a disaster where he fumbles the ball or something, it becomes a real problem. Now, one of the things that I think is really, really what I would call a big edge for the Steelers is if you look at their depth chart, they're very healthy. They're very healthy right now. I mean, they're in a place now where, considering how late it is in the season and all of the other injuries that they've had, I think it's pretty amazing, to be honest, how healthy they are. And that's going to be part of their edge for sure. So to me, everything is lining up for the Steelers to be really, really, really good in this and really well versed in being able to beat the Browns. I don't even think the Steelers have to play their best game. I think if the Steelers just play reasonably well, they're going to win. Just reasonably well. They don't have to be great. Just be reasonably good. If they do that, they're going to win. And so then we're talking about a team that's 9-2 and heading into sort of the meat of their schedule. I think, honestly, and basically you get almost like a mini bye type thing because when you play Thursday night, you get, 3 extra days off, 4 extra days off or whatever to get ready for your next game. So there's a lot to like about the Steelers going down the stretch here. There's a lot to like about where they're at, how they are playing, how healthy they are. All of that stuff seems to be really, really good. It's all headed in the right direction. So now the next step for that is it's going to have to be they need to go out and win these kind of games like this where there's no reason why they shouldn't win. Period. No reason why they shouldn't win. And I think that's where we're headed with it. I mean, in so many ways, that's where we're headed with it. And I feel like it is got to be an important discussion down the stretch here. Where they're going to land in the pecking order in the AFC. Because I think, honestly, things are really starting to line up for them to be in a great spot, in a great place. And that's really, to me, I think the biggest thing when we talk about the Steelers is what is their path to the Super Bowl? Obviously, you make your path easier if you win more. And if you get to the point where you're the number 1 seed, then you get a week off. But my point there is if you don't, even if you're the 2 or the 3 seed, theoretically you should have a pretty easy route to get to that second weekend. So everything is pointing up for the Steelers. I think if you look at this game coming up against the Browns, given all the injuries we talked about with Cleveland, given the fact that they're probably not going to be all that motivated to really want to go out and play, and given the fact that the Steelers are healthy and motivated, I think this is a game the Steelers should be able to walk in and really destroy the Browns. won't shock me if it's more than they win by more than 10 points, which in the NFL is it's pretty much a blowout if it's more than 10 points. The other thing, the other subject I wanted to get into really is the fact that Paul Skenes, as you saw, who, had an incredible season and is a really, really incredible pitcher. I mean, it's amazing, but he is the Rookie of the Year. I think he's going to have a chance to win the Cy Young, isn't he? I mean, honestly, if you look at his numbers, they were absurd, really. I mean, he's just a guy that went out and basically got it done. He won 23 of the 30 possible votes. If he's, looking at it from that standpoint, 11-3, 1.96 ERA. His whip was 9.947. And really 170 strikeouts is just 133 innings. If you think about what the Pirates have in Paul Skenes, Jason Mackey wrote a really good story today, I think it was today, about this. You've got Paul Skenes, and because he won the Rookie of the Year, I think now they have his rights only through like 2028 or 2029 or something like that. Whatever it is, I think it's 2029 because Rookie of the Year, basically, the Pirates lose a year of control of him. Here's what I'm going to tell you. You've got a guy, and this is what Jason Mackey talked about, and he's right. You've got a guy like him on your roster. A guy who, if you look at what the going rate is for starting pitchers, stud starting pitchers, is now what, $350 million? I mean, it was about 5, 6, 7 years ago, Clayton Kershaw got $330 million. So really the going rate's probably closer to 450, maybe $500 million for a pitcher like him. It's clear the Pirates will not be able to sign him sign him again. But the reality is, if you look at the fact they have him, they have a pitch they can't afford because he's on rookie contracts and then he's on, he'll be in arbitration and all that other stuff. They have to build a team around him to give themselves a chance to win. Otherwise, they're going to waste him. I mean, if we sit here and we look up 5 years from now and they haven't really made the playoffs or made a run or gotten any better, and now they have to trade Paul Skenes because he's becoming too expensive, it'll be a complete waste. And I think that's where this offseason it has to start. They have to be realistic about what they have around Paul Skenes. And again, I'll reiterate, that means they need to go out and get a first baseman that can actually hit. They need to go out and get one more outfielder at least, somebody that you can put in the outfield every single day that hits reasonably well. They need to go out and get a couple more relievers. I mean, I don't know that they're that far off, but the reality is they can't keep running out there with some of the jabronis they put out there on the field and think they're going to compete. You have Jared Jones. You have Mitch Keller, you have all these other, what's his name? I can't even remember. Ortiz. You've got all these other guys on your rotation, but you've got a guy at the top of your rotation who's better than just about every pitcher in the league. And if you do, you need to make sure that you build. And you build around him, and you make it so that you have a chance to win. So they need to go out and get a first baseman that can hit. They need to go out and get another outfielder. They probably need to go out and get a shortstop. I mean, I know that that's one of those things where people are, people were really excited when the Pirates, quote unquote, stole, what was his name? Isaiah Kiner Khalifa. And then they put him as their everyday shortstop. And you know what? Every other team on the planet looked at that and said, he's a good utility player. He's not a shortstop. But they went out and got him. I think Nick Gonzalez is good enough at second. I do. I think because of his glove, Brian Hayes is good enough at third. But he's got to hit better. I'm actually okay with Andy Rodriguez and Joey Bart at catcher. But they need to get better at shortstop. They need to get better at first base. They need probably one more starting pitcher, but probably maybe not. They could probably get away with what they have if Keller and Jones and Skenes are, pitched to the level we think they're going to pitch. And they need some more relievers. They need help in their bullpen, which means they've got to go out and, are we ready for it? Spend money. And I know that's not going to probably happen, but if it doesn't happen, then what are we even doing here when it comes to the Pirates? What are we even doing here? You've got a guy in Paul Skenes who's better than pretty much the rest of the league at that position. And the thing is, there are a number of people that don't understand what makes him so great. They think it's the 103 mile an hour fastball or the 101 mile an hour, that we see, or the 102. They think that's what makes Paul Skenes so great. That's not. What makes Paul Skenes so great, obviously he's got the power arm. There's a lot of guys with power arms in the league. What makes him so great is that he's got 5 legitimate pitches to throw at you. And not just 5 legitimate pitches to throw at you, but he has 5 pitches that he commands in the zone, that he's really good, and that he's able to throw for strikes. And the fact is, when you think about it from this standpoint, he has had some games where his fastball wasn't, he wasn't able to control it. He didn't have the command he needed, and he wasn't able to throw it past batters, hitters or whatever, and he adjusted. And, he had games where he had, his slider was what he was looking at, or his splinker. Remember the splinker pitch? He had the splinker or the slider. He also has a changeup. I mean, all these pitches are really good. And then, of course, I remember at least one game where his curveball was what played, and he got guys out with his curveball. So to me, I look at it from that standpoint, and I say you've got an elite talent at pitcher, a guy who's better than anybody in the league. So if you don't make this roster better in the offseason, and I don't want to hear about, we've got, Bubba Chandler coming, and we've got what was the kid's name that they traded for the Red Sox to the AAA guy York. We've got him coming. I don't really want to hear about that. I want to hear about how you are actually improving your team by going out and getting real players. And I'm not talking about players that cost $25 million or $30 million or, whatever. I'm not talking about that. I don't think anybody that knows anything about the Pirates is talking about that. But to me, we look at it and we say this. Could you go out and spend a little bit of money to get better? And I don't think they're able to. So tomorrow I will be off. I will be back on Thursday. I'll be back on Friday. Thursday I'll have some sort of a pregame or pregame situation, and then Adam and I will do postgame. Hopefully we'll be talking about a Steelers win. But until that such time, I will basically talk.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.